Okay, today our fluency lesson is the same passage. So I'm going to read that again, and you guys are focusing on not just accuracy today, but also phrasing and pausing. So we're looking at punctuation. You guys, I'm going to do my best. Obviously, I'm not a perfect reader either. We're all improving as readers all the time, but I'm going to do my best to pause when you're supposed to. And we kind of talked about some of that yesterday. And then phrasing, listen to where I might group a phrase together and read it all at the same speed and then kind of close that. That's kind of when we talk about phrasing. That's where we might be speeding up and slowing down. We talked about pace in phrasing. So, and then today we're going to talk about the words that are, let me double check, in yellow. Okay. Some of these you've probably heard before, but what do they really mean? And we'll talk about that at the end. Okay. Snow has the same origin as rain. It comes from vapor in the atmosphere, especially from vapor rising from the surface of the sea. When a sudden cooling off takes place in clouds at high elevation, the condensation of vapor is immediately followed by freezing, which turns water into ice. I have already told you that cirrus clouds, which are the highest of all clouds and hence more exposed to cold than others, are composed of extremely fine needles of ice. Lower clouds, too, if subject to a sufficient degree of cold, undergo the same transformation. Then there follows a symmetrical grouping of adjacent needles in delicate six-point stars which, in greater or less numbers and heaped together, are at random, make a snowflake. Soon afterward, when it has grown too heavy to float in the air, the flake falls to the ground. Examine attentively one that has just fallen on the dark background of your sleeve or end cap. You will see a mass of beautiful little starry crystals so graceful in form, so delicate structure, that the most skillful fingers could never hope to make anything like them. These exquisite formations, which put to shame our poor human artistry, have nevertheless sprung from the haphazard mingling of cloud masses. Such, then, is the nature of snow, the schoolboy's favorite plaything. From a somber and silent sky it falls softly, almost perpendicularly. The eye follows it in its fall. Above, in the gray depths, it looks like the confused whirling of a swarm of white insects. Below, it resembles a shower of down, each flake turning round and reaching ground only after considerable hesitation. If the snowfall continues thus for a little while, everything will be hidden under a sheet of dazzling whiteness. Okay, so what we want you to do is read through this passage individually. Try to record yourself if you can and listen to it, and listen for how you're doing. Do the phrases as you're reading along with your own listening. Are you reading the passage the way you thought you should? And then go back and read it a second time. You don't have to record it and see if you improve or change your reading. Today we're talking about these words that are in yellow. And so a lot of them are words that we might use in place of other words, and they kind of add emphasis and transition to what we're discussing. So the first one is hence. Okay, so I have already told you that cirrus clouds, which are the highest of all clouds, and hence more exposed to cold than others, are composed of extremely fine needles of ice. So there's a clause there, which are the highest of all clouds. So it's describing the cirrus clouds, and it's using that description. When we say the word hence, it's kind of like saying therefore. So it's a word that is added for emphasis, or what we might say transition. So it's it's kind of picking the sentence back up with that clause. So you could take the clause out, and you can say, I've already told you that cirrus clouds, hence, are more exposed to the. So the clause there is what leaves us with the word hence. It's connecting this description of what happens in the cirrus clouds to the definition of cirrus clouds. So it's kind of like saying because, or really therefore, is a good supplement for hence. So it's another, we would use the word hence in places where we might say therefore or because in our writing, right? So this was saying, I have already told you that cirrus clouds, which are the highest of all clouds, so they're really high, and therefore, we say the word hence, more exposed to cold than others because they're high, because they're higher up. Are composed of extremely fine needles of ice. So that's kind of what the word hence is talking about. So you could use that in a sentence where you would say the word therefore. So usually it means that you're stating a fact and then you're saying, hence, this happens. So you're saying this is true, hence, this is a result, right? So we have a definition and then a reasoning. Okay, nevertheless is our next word. So these exquisite formations, which put to shame our poor human artistry, have nevertheless sprung from the haphazard mingling of cloud masses. So nevertheless is like, you could look at that and go, that's 3 words in 1 word. What does that mean? All right, so we'll think about it. Nevertheless, so maybe it's less likely to happen, but even though it's less likely, it still happens. So it's a way to talk about maybe something that's rare that would take place. So I might I might compensate, or there may be something that goes on. So for example, like it snowed 8 inches this week. Nevertheless, we're still having school and my assignments are expected to be finished. So anyway is another synonym for this. So I could say like these exquisite formations which put to shame our poor human artistry have anyway, or you might hear the word like have otherwise. So it's saying like just because they're extremely intricate doesn't mean they came from some planned structure, right? And that's kind of what's happening. You would think. So when you're comparing 2 things that may not occur, you might say the word nevertheless. So even though this happened, even though blank, I'm saying nevertheless, right? And it's kind of saying despite the obstacles or regardless of the obstacles, this still happens. Okay, down here, considerable. This is probably a word that most of you understand the most out of these 4, right? So, and reaching the ground only after a considerable hesitation, right? So it's basically saying more hesitation or a greater amount of hesitation. Because after hesitation, I'm emphasizing how long that hesitation is by using the word considerable, right? I'm emphasizing how rare the formation of snowflakes are by using the word nevertheless. So even though this should take a lot of time, it happens in a crazy situation, all right? I'm emphasizing why cirrus clouds are where snow forms because of where it's at. So there's emphasis with each of these words. We're emphasizing either more information or we're emphasizing the event itself, right? So considerable is emphasizing the amount of hesitation, right? So I could take considerable out and I could say ground only after hesitation, right? But considerable emphasizes the amount of time that hesitation. Like if you look at snow, sometimes you get mesmerized by it. And I think a lot of that is because rain falls real quickly, right? But snow kind of drifts down. So it kind of mesmerizes us, or you can like zone out a little bit. And so that's what this is describing, that kind of hesitation. And the word considerable is emphasizing how long that hesitation is, especially compared to rain, which was introduced at the very beginning. And then our last word, if the snowfall continues, thus. Thus would be like this way. All right. So I could say, if the snow continues this way for a little while, so in this manner is a way to say it. Thus is just one word that can replace that clause, and it means basically this way, right? So I'm emphasizing the previous sentence by using this word. Usually that's what's happening when I say thus. I'm talking about something I've mentioned in the past, and then I'm going to describe why it still happens. So we're emphasizing what's already taken place or something already talked about. If the snowfall continues thus for a little while, everything will be hidden under a sheet of dazzling whiteness. So it's basically saying if this keeps happening, then everything will be covered like it is outside today. So these yellow words obviously are being used to emphasize things, and they're also have lots of synonyms. So when you're writing your sentences, think about, you might need to write two so that you can use the word to emphasize something from the previous sentence or to talk about something in the next sentence. But that's all up to you. So your job with these words is to write them in a sentence. You can use other sentences to help give context to that sentence if you need to. But hopefully you can see how these words are used to emphasize things in the passage. All right. Have a good day.